Go.
Okay, day 3 with angles. These are review. If you don't already know these terms, please make sure you memorize them. Complementary angles add to 90. Supplementary angles add to 180. Remember the trick to remember these is C comes before S and 90 comes before 180. However you want to remember it, make sure you remember the difference. Vertical angles are two angles across from one another. Again, you want to look for that X. They're directly across from one another and they are congruent. Adjacent angles are angles that are next to each other. They share a ray, if you remember that from our last lesson. So using these ideas, we're going to go a step further and use algebra, and knowing these terms, we're going to find unknowns. So let's look at our first example. So the first thing we want to do is decide what kind of angles these are. And the angles I'm talking about is this little one and this little one. What can we call them? What can we name them?
Vertical.
These are vertical angles. So that's the first thing I want you to decide. What kind of angles they are. It's the 4 terms that we just talked about. So these are vertical angles. What do we know about the relationship of vertical angles?
The vertical angles, they have to be congruent.
They're congruent. So if they're congruent, that tells me how to set up my equation. So I'm kind of showing you guys the steps that you need to go through. Decide, name them. Because I know they're vertical, I know that they're congruent. Because they're congruent, that allows me to say that these two are the same measurement, which allows me to set it up this way. Does that look like an equation we probably have solved a couple months ago? Having variables on both sides? So what's the first step in solving this equation? Because our goal is to figure out what X is. What's our first step?
Move the X to the other side.
Yep. Remember we went through all of that list. We're going to move our X to the left, and of course you're going to show your work like I showed you guys how to do. Remember, you're going to line up your X's, because we can't combine 2X and 9, but we can combine that negative 2X and the X because they have the same terms. Remember, what I've already taught you still applies. We need to solve our equations properly. So working from left to right, 1 minus 2 or X minus 2X gives me negative X. Bring down the plus 9. Bring down the equals. This becomes 0, so it disappears. And I'm going to bring down my 3. This is what you guys have already practiced and spent a lot of time on. What's my next step in getting X by itself?
Move the 9 over.
Exactly. Again, our goal is to get the X by itself, so we're going to move the 9. We're going to do the opposite operation to the same number. So we're going to subtract 9 on both sides. And again, I want you to show your work exactly the way I'm doing it, because I've taught this to you guys already. We're going to bring down the negative X. These become 0. Bring down the equals. 3 minus 9 is negative 6. What's my last step?
Just divide everything by -1.
Good. Remember, there's a -1 there. We talked about that quite a bit. This is -1 times X. So I'm going to divide by -1 on both sides. On the left, a negative divided by a negative gives me a positive. On the right, same idea, -6 divided by -1 gives me positive 6. So this is the answer that I'm looking for. So showing your work is important. Our goal was to find out what X was. We use the idea that these are vertical angles to find out what X is. Look at the next one. Let's name them. What can I call these angles?
Supplementary.
They're supplementary. Good. That's a starting point. You need to know what they are so you can figure out how to set it up. So I can call them supplementary. What do we know about the relationship of supplementary angles?
It has to add up to 180 on both sides.
Good. I don't like both sides. They just add to 180. Okay. So we can say X plus 13, this angle plus this angle equals 180. How do I go about getting X by itself? What's my first step?
Combine 13 and the 117.
When you have lots going on like this one does, you want to combine like terms. In this case, it's these two numbers. We want to add those together before we start moving anything. So what does 13 and 117 give me?
130.
Now what? Our goal is to get X by itself. Now what?
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Subtract 130 from the 180.
We're doing the opposite operation to the same number to move it to the other side. 180 minus 130 gives me 60. So take a second and look at why this is. So this one's 117. When I plug this in over here, what would this angle be?
It gives you 50, not 60.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for correcting that for me. When I plug in X over here, what would I get here? What would this angle be? Now I know that X is 50. What's this angle?
That would be a 63-degree angle.
Exactly. So you can find this angle two different ways now. I could just subtract from 180, but now that I know what X is, this angle is X plus 13. I know that X is 50. So 50 plus 13 gives me 63. So this angle is 63 degrees. We can find it algebraically or just by subtracting. Okay, let's have one more example over here. So my first question is, what kind of angles are these? What kind? No, they're not vertical. No, I'm glad you made that mistake. Vertical looks like this. They're two angles that are across from one another. Try again. There you go, you got it. They're complementary. And complementary angles, what's their relationship?
Add to 90.
They add to 90. So because I know that, that helps me set up my next part of my problem. So this angle plus this angle has to give me 90. So you can see how I'm working through these problems and thinking through each step. I need to say in my equation, 2x minus 5 plus x plus 2 equals what? 90. Because I know that they have to add to 90. Now before I start moving anything around, I want to consolidate, combine like terms. I see a 2x and a plus 2x. What does that give me?
3x.
3x. I see a minus 5 and I see a plus 2 that can be combined. What does that give me?
-3.
Good. And I'm going to bring everything else down. Remember, when we are solving equations, it's important that you do a step and you bring everything down, but it's important that you see where everything came from. I can see that I still have my equals, my 90 is the same. Where did that -3 come from? Well, I combine these. Where did this come from? I combine these. It should be obvious. What's my next step?
Would you subtract, add 3?
Exactly. We want to get rid of the plain number first. We're going to get rid of the 3 by adding. Bring down my 3x. Bring down my equals. Add on this side and I get 93. It's my last step.
You divide by 3.
Good. Anybody know what this is on the top, off the top of your head? What is it?
31.
Good job. So again, when we now know what x is, now I can plug this back in. For this one, I have x plus 2. I now know that x is 31. So what's the measurement of that angle?
33.
33 degrees.
It's 33 degrees. How about this one? I have 2 times 31 minus 5. Now that I know what x is, I can plug it in and use it. 2 times 31, who can do that in your head?
62.
62 minus 5?
47.
Good job. When I add these two things together, do I get 90?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I do.
Was it 62 minus 5?
Yeah, 2 times 31 is 62.
Wouldn't it be
It
57?
would be 57.
Thank you guys. 57 and 33, yeah, that would have given us 80 instead of 90. 57 and 33 add up to 90. And they are complementary, we can see that in the picture.